Welcome to my devlog series where I document the challenges I undertake each month using Unreal Engine's free for the month assets. The rules of the challenge are, as always, I must use at least one of Epic's free for the month assets. I shouldn't spend more than 1 week of effort on the project for the whole month. I must make a video reviewing the assets and what was learned. As usual, let's start with a look at what we've got this month. Sim Polytown, another addition to the stylized asset pile. These are fairly unique in style, which might make it hard to mix in with other assets, but the scope of the assets provided is way more than usual. It would be great if you could find fitting character designs for it. Character Body FX Volume 1. I'm not really sure when I'll need my character to be made out of and dripping coins or crystals everywhere, and I'm pretty sure I could find a tutorial how to make these effects somewhere on YouTube in under 10 minutes. Also, the pricing of this asset is pretty sketchy, especially compared to what the authors of the other assets here are charging. Modular Sci-Fi Village. This is a weird one. I guess in the far future we all live in glass houses in the middle of nowhere with benches made out of rocks. Bank Building Interior Modular. An elegant looking building packed with lights and reflective surfaces. Ultimate FPS Puzzle Kit. This is a nice plugin. It seems kind of basic at first, but it actually has quite a good selection of features built in. I'm pretty sure it has exactly every mechanic from Portal 1 except for enemies. And for the permanently free collection we have nothing. That's pretty unusual. I wonder what's going on there or if I missed something. Yet another thin month. The obvious answer is to combine the FPS puzzle kit with the bank asset, but that's kind of underwhelming. Well, see you on the other side? Let's jump right into a quick review of the assets I used. First off, Sim Polytown. Overall, I think this is a well-built asset. I do have some questions like, why is the road themed like a racetrack, and why does this city need walk signs if there are no sidewalks? Also, the scale of certain things might need to be adjusted if you actually wanted to have a character walk around the world at ground level, as most of the assets are more suited to a miniature style. Next up is Ultimate FPS Puzzle Kit. While the actual implementation is rough, overall I think the author provides a good set of mechanics and ways to tie them together, especially for someone who is just starting out and maybe doesn't even want to write any blueprint code yet. The documentation is also very clear on what extra things you need to set up to get the project working. I can definitely see the potential for a lot of puzzles that could be made with the mechanics provided. I think this might actually be the most complete and beginner-friendly mechanical asset pack I've seen Epic give away so far. Next we have Bank Building Interior Modular. It's a bank, probably. I say probably because there is no vault and there are no currency assets placed anywhere. So what you're really going to be able to make is a building with a lobby, employees behind some glass, and a boring office space. I can only wonder why the author would make all this, market it as a bank, and not have a vault anywhere. I suppose it could be a hotel with very well protected receptionists. Next up is another asset I have which I decided to use to make this month a bit more interesting. Dungeon Architect. Dungeon Architect is a highly popular asset that allows you to generate and theme randomized layouts of rooms and the things in them. It's also available in Unity, and while all this sounds cool on the surface, the huge scope of the plugin and user base, all being supported by one person, does seem to create difficulties with the developer making progress and helping customers. If you haven't guessed from the breakdown, this month I decided to try to test the modularity of these assets with how well they could be integrated with the highly popular Dungeon Architect plugin. This was the first time I've used Dungeon Architect, and it was definitely interesting. There is a huge learning curve, and big parts of it are only half finished, so I can definitely only recommend this if you need the most basic features listed in the plugin and are willing to fight it or wait for support in regards to areas where the documentation is incorrect or missing. But I think I was able to slap together some interesting things in the short time I had to work with it. First thing I tried was using the city builder with Sim Polytown. It struggled with the roads at first because the corners aren't built in the way that Dungeon Architect needs them, but I was able to fix it by offsetting the corner to the side and offsetting the connecting roads down to prevent Z-fighting. You can see some obvious artifacts of this here. Ultimately, I suppose this doesn't really matter, but this kind of shows that when you're making modular assets, you really need to understand how they're going to be used. So when one of your assets is a different size than the others, it's going to create problems for your users. Maybe that's my fault, but when I hear an asset is modular, I think the asset should be similar to Lego bricks, where pieces can be fitted together in different ways and have unique shapes, but at their core, they are designed to snap together in such a way that I should be able to use a generator to make levels out of them without the asset itself getting in the way. I would say most of the assets I used for this suburbia generator were perfectly suitable. I had to scale many of the houses to fit in a single plot and not clip into each other, but I think if I had more experience with Dungeon Architect, there would be a way to create multi-cell single plots so houses could take up their full size. The next thing I tried was generating a random sequence of puzzles. This didn't work very well, as Dungeon Architect's out of the box grid flow option doesn't really have much that lets you mess with the layout of important objects in rooms. By default, you're only able to place additional decorative objects in each cell, but it's not possible to decide that this room should have certain puzzle elements and then place them sensibly. Once you dig through all the options and override a bunch of the behavior, you can start doing interesting things. According to the documentation, at least. I don't know if this is a UE5 issue only, but a lot of the things that the documentation mentions are either in a different place or plain just don't exist. I was able to set up a few really simple puzzle rooms and make the objects hook themselves up properly once they spawn. Each time you solve the room, the door opens, and then when you reach the goal, it randomizes a new dungeon. Unfortunately, to add multiple puzzle rooms to the same dungeon, I would have to manually copy the entire node trees for creating the rooms and change a special variable on each node in those trees. I would like to see Dungeon Architect's key and lock subsystem to be parameterized better, so you don't need to copy and maintain a bunch of extra stuff just to have multiple puzzles in the dungeon, and also have the ability to generate a random amount of puzzles instead of always the exact same number. I didn't have too much time to mess around, so I wouldn't be surprised if there is a way to do this externally with the dungeon object, but why not just have it be a built-in setting that doesn't require extra code? Finally, I created what I've been calling the bank rooms, as a reference to the popular internet horror universe of the back rooms. This uses the snap grid flow feature to create a three-dimensional layout of rooms that are all built to snap together at predefined points. Overall, I would rate the modularity of the bank assets as pretty high, but I did run into a few problems that made it annoying to work around. I like that the author made some assets that come with a combined interior and exterior wall, but they also should have provided walls and floors that were just the interior or exterior only. Having to compensate for the extra space these assets take up when I only need half of them was annoying. I think because of the combined interior exterior, they also didn't think to add corners for some of the interior meshes, so I had to use the modeling tools and cut them up myself. This leads to places where there are a lot of seams showing, which could also have been solved if they used world coordinates for the materials instead. The last little gripe I have is that the door frame mesh is offset and includes an entire wall section, which basically made lining things up for Dungeon Architect a nightmare. But ignoring that, I think I was able to make an eerie place that, if you added creepy sounds or even just hints of a monster watching you, following you, you could definitely scare some people with it. And that's February wrapped up. I may have to do more challenges like this going forward so I can keep learning new things, even when we have a drought of assets month to month. It was definitely interesting just scratching the surface of Dungeon Architect, and I have a few more plugins that I'd like to get familiar with as well. Also, I do have a Discord link in the description, so if you would like to share your ideas or talk about anything else, feel free to join. As always, if you have any suggestions or just want to tell me how awful I am, feel free to leave a comment, I guess.